feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast, and we are brought to you by Prize Picks. Coming to you Tuesday morning. It's December 16th, and coming up on today's show, it's a Kyle pod. I've got Kyle Theige here with me. Kyle, let's just jump kind of right into it. The last episode we did was after the Wolves' loss to the Suns a week ago, and we did an episode titled 4 Questions Following the Wolves' Loss to Phoenix, and it was existential and like, is this thing, moving in the right direction? It was feeling like, kind of a same old. It was another late game loss. But a weird way, a lot has kind of happened in that time since then. Anthony Edwards and Mike Conley have actually been out with injuries since that last game. Bones Highland has become a fixture of the Wolves rotation since Phoenix, and he's actually started in Ant's place for the last 2 games. And I think sort of in this time, the Wolves, that win against Golden State was one of their better wins of the season, even without Ant. And then they win again on Sunday. It's kind of hard with this team when things are moving in the right direction to really feel like the train is humming. But do you feel like the Wolves have, even just in the last week, like answered some questions about themselves since that loss to Phoenix a week ago?
Yeah, I do. And I know we have a loose outline today, so I think this would be the time to kind of talk about where they are, right? Like you wake up today, you and I, we're going to get into our favorite game of the week, which has nothing to do with the Timberwolves, by the way, but there was a barn burner last night in Denver. But they are 17-9. And I know that I think everyone that comes on here has a slant or a lean, and I'm very biased, but I think it's 17-9 through 26 games. They're on pace for 54 wins. And this is I am addressing your question directly, but I just went back and looked, right? Because at 17-9, if you say a positive thing about it, it does feel like, okay, they haven't beaten anyone, easy schedule, a lot of things that are factual, but 54 win pace. Through 26 games last season, they were 14-12. They were on pace for 44 wins. And they beat the Kings, the Raptors, the Hornets, the Bulls, the Blazers, the Kings, the Suns, the Clippers, and the Lakers without Luka. So they didn't really have they did beat the Nuggets, I think, in game 5. But last season, when they were trying to acclimate all these new pieces and stuff, and it was far more toxic, they didn't really have many signature wins either. They kind of beat up on cupcake teams. So this season, as I said a couple of weeks ago, I felt like they were an Austin Reeves game winner away from being like a 4 seed. And since that weekend where we did a podcast late on a Monday night and it was like everything is going to hell, I feel like they have answered some questions. You've continued to see, and that's what the best part about an 82-game season and doing 4 pods a week is, like, this Bones Highland thing now is fun and we're in the bone zone, but it also might be like a big answer to some of the questions about what could happen at the trade deadline, right? Like the Jaden McDaniels thing was fun for the first 10, 12 games. And now it's like, oh, like the baseline is just higher. Like maybe he is like a 3rd option on a championship level team. So since that Suns Kings weekend debacle, I do think I think it was Chris or John had a good stat about the Wolves being really good in the clutch time the last couple of weeks, like since that weekend of hell. So I think we get so entranced now in the NBA in 2025 of covering it like it's football. And I'm not like blaming Vikings fans. I'm a Vikings fan, but I don't know if we're ever right when we do that. Like every game actually doesn't matter, right? Like in the moment, it's like, yes, for the standings and all that stuff. And last year, every win mattered because the Wolves had to evade, the play-in. But big picture in the last 2 weeks, to answer your question, I do think you've seen a lot of really good things that should allow this team to feel more confident as, just like last year, they embark on what's upcoming is a really tough part of their schedule.
Yeah, and I kind of like each game doesn't matter and what matters more. Maybe when you're at this level that the Wolves are, of being one of the top teams in the Western Conference and having gone to the Western Conference Finals 2 years in a row, it is more about how are things trending, right? Are things that are clear issues have like semi-resolutions or full resolutions, and are the things that are really working, like you bring up Jaden, are those things consistent and permanent? And I think that is the right way to be, or to the best way to most accurately be looking at what this team is, also without like kind of driving yourself crazy of like, oh, another late game loss, or going the other way of, oh, it doesn't matter, it's the Kings. And I will say for me, I said this a little bit yesterday with Chase, like I felt like in these two games, specifically the Golden State game, some of those trend line items for me that I see to be really important in prognosticating what this team is have started to kind of file in a little bit more. I don't Bones Highland isn't like a paint with a broad brush, everything's fixed, but it is kind of interesting of what are some of the things we've talked about this team needing and not having thus far this season. Backup point guard play, somebody to inject pace into the game. You know, you get that from deep on the bench. Do we know the sustainability element of that for sure? No, but we also don't know that it won't be, right? Like, I think we've seen this team when it's struggled be very static with its ball movement or static with its energy and low levels. If you look again at that Golden State game and watch just that game, I don't think you really feel too much of that, right? So to some end, I think absolutely some of the smaller line items that seemed in the lowest parts of the season to be maybe like, I'm not sure if this is ever going to change, actually having some incremental change. And when you factor that in to the fact that they're 17-9 and on a 54 win pace, it does, just for myself, like you said, doing podcasts every day, you kind of go, well, I don't know. Have I just been nitpicking the whole time? And then that comes to what is the lens that we're looking through this all at, right? Like, because it's a very different question and answer or way to analyze if you're looking at it through the lens of these first 26 games versus looking at it through the lens of where does this team stack up in the greater Western Conference? Where does it stack up at the top of the Western Conference? Because it's hard to give them so much credit for going to the Western Conference Finals 2 years in a row as they deserve without holding them to a similar standard this season. I just think it's a little bit confusing to do a podcast about. I think it's a little bit confusing for people who are just, in their Wolves group message talking about this. Like, what even is the standard? And maybe the thing is that the standard should not be so specific to one game, and it should be looking at this thing with broader strokes. And with that, I don't think if you're even looking at it with broader strokes, you're like, okay, everything is fine. Like, this is something that they're going to be navigating and figuring out. Like, we knew that over the course of this season, that this was going to be about trending up the whole time, avoiding the dips, avoiding some sort of collapse. And the collapse thing definitely hasn't happened. Even if the emotion surrounding the team sometimes has felt like that, I think we're still in the figuring it out phase, and that's neither great nor is it the end of the world. And that might just be reality for a team who has gone to Western Conference Finals for consecutive seasons and is, in fact, figuring it out. Like, that's just the reality of the situation. Also is the reality of the situation that they're 17-9. Like, multiple things can be true.
Are we figuring it out for the Timberwolves on December 16th? Or are we figuring it out for the NBA? Because, like, this is where I push back on some of the Brit stuff, who Brit knows way more about basketball than I do, but I just don't know how to digest the take of, we don't know if this is a championship level team or not. When it's like, yeah, we're 26 games into the season, right? Like, a lot of people want to point out, like, the Wolves are 2 games back of the Nuggets, right? But everyone's like, oh, the Wolves have had this easy schedule. Well, the Nuggets and Thunder are 1 and 2 right now in strength of schedule, in terms of the easiest schedule in the league. Now, the Thunder are a little different, and we're just going to put them on a pedestal until someone actually gets up there and knocks them down. But, like, last night, the Nuggets finally beat the Rockets. They hadn't won a game at home since November 10th. Like, they hadn't won a home game in a month. You talk to people who cover the Nuggets, and they are having the same kind of existential crisis of, like, is this team actually any good? Was the Michael Porter Jr. trade worth it? Like, Cam Johnson hasn't really figured it out yet. So I'm not trying to, like, criticize them, as you said, nitpicking, but every time I go into a new week, or like I wake up the morning after a game, my views are so different than a week after, right? Because after the weekend from hell. Then they went and lost to the Thunder, right? Even though they had a team gathering. Then they've won 7 of 8. Like, there's really, other than dropping that game against the Suns at home, I mean, what else could you really expect? And then this is kind of where a little bit of my fandom comes in. I just don't really get criticizing wins. Like that Celtics game when Ant is at the top of the key and there's no ball movement and he just kind of dribbles between his legs, picks it up, chucks it in, and makes it to clinch it. That's probably not sustainable. But they did win, right? Like that, they did beat a good Celtics team. So it just kind of like makes me think of like these 4 quadrants of like good win, bad loss, bad loss. It's very hard, I think, in the NBA right now to have like a good win. Like, and that's going to come up. Like, they're going to have a tougher schedule coming up. Christmas Day, they have a big game. Like, they play the Thunder this month. They play the Knicks again. Like, it's going to get harder. But if you can win games and stack wins, which maybe we can talk about corporate America a little bit and like what the job description is of a head coach in an organization. If you can continue to just keep swimming while trying to figure out your different strokes, I think that's what this team is doing. And again, that goes back to like, let's talk about the young guys, because I thought we got a really good quote this week and you played it yesterday, but I think there's way more meat on the bone there. Like, all of a sudden, this team that needed scoring punch and a little leadership and swag off the bench has gotten it all of a sudden from a guy who's on a partially guaranteed contract. And while some of these other teams are battling some injuries, the Wolves have been fairly healthy, but their best players miss more games in a short period of time than he's ever missed in his NBA career. So you can make a bunch of content about it, but I also think too, like, you do have to at least acknowledge, no matter what political party you represent in this Timberwolves ecosystem, that they are on pace for 54.5 wins in a year that they were projected at 48.5, in a year removed from when they were 44 win projected. So there's still a lot of things to figure out, but that's why I like doing this. I'm not so concerned about what it's going to look like in April, because we're going to get to April and we'll have a much better idea.
I think that transitions well into, talking about the top 6 teams in the Western Conference, because it is possible that the Wolves could be better than some of those top 6 teams in the Western Conference, even though the only one of them that they've beaten thus far is the Spurs without Wembanyama in the one game. They lost to Denver, Oklahoma City, haven't played Houston. I've lost to the Lakers. But you mentioned Oklahoma City up on a pedestal by themselves, and I think kind of in self-reflection of my stuff this season, I think I've done a lot of comparing the Wolves to the Thunder. And I'm not saying that's 100% wrong. The Wolves played the Thunder in the Western Conference Finals last year. That's kind of the bar. That's what we did when the Wolves got knocked out by the Nuggets. And then the next year had to play them. I think I was very much just kind of going along that sort of same thought process of, where are the Wolves against the Nuggets? Where are the Wolves against the Thunder now? And the reality of the situation is, with the Thunder's play, they've kind of elevated them to, in this top 6, a pedestal on their own. For right now, at least in the regular season, they're not invincible. They lost to one of these top 6 teams in the in-season tournament. So if I'm putting Oklahoma City up there in a regular season context right now, I'm trying to figure out where the Wolves are in this next group of the next 5 teams, because there's clearly a top 6 in the Western Conference. And like you said, we had the Nuggets and Rockets played last night. We both watched that game, which was great Jokic and Şengün battle. And I'm trying to figure out, are the Wolves in that Houston and Denver group right there, or are they in the Spurs and the Lakers group? Just kind of below them. Is there 3 tiers in this? I think there are 3 tiers in this Western Conference top 6. And I don't know if the Wolves are in the Denver-Houston one, or if they find themselves in the Spurs-Lakers one. I have some just like numbers and stuff I'd like to go through on that. But what is just your initial thought of like where you feel the Wolves stack up in the top 6 of the Western Conference right now?
Yeah, I think this is way more fun to talk about than like, was it a good idea for Finch to call that timeout on a 4-on-5 when Russell Westbrook was underneath the basket? It was a bad timeout, by the way. But like, that's nitpicking. This to me is more like, okay, let's take a core sample of like, where do we stack up? To the Thunder point, they're 24-2, and they're projected to have 2 picks in the top 9 next season. Just want to mention that because I don't know if everyone looks at Tankathon still. We've all graduated from having to worry about ping pong balls, but I'm not sure a team has ever been set up better for a long run. I mean, dude, they have 2 picks in a loaded draft in the top 9. It is insane. And if you hate the Thunder, you really got to watch Clipper games and pray to God that they win because the Thunder have a Clippers pick. Yeah, so the 2 through 6 right now, as of this morning, is Denver, the Lakers, the Spurs, the Rockets, the Wolves. The Wolves have lost twice to the Suns, but there's a 3-game gap there. So if you're a Suns fan, you're like, how are you not putting us in the top 6 or in that tier? I still do think there's like a firm top 6. They're not the Thunder. But if you do look 2 through 5, I don't know, man. Like watching Denver, Houston last night. Denver doesn't have Aaron Gordon right now. Their defense is kind of a sieve, but I really do think they stack up well with the Rockets. Minnesota does. I'm not quite sure yet about Denver just because like the Rockets are a really good team. They do start Josh Okogie and he plays a lot of minutes and they rely on Reed Shepherd to take a lot of shots, which is funny to think that there was a conversation about like him versus Rob Dillingham for a while. And those guys have kind of gone in different paths for now. But I don't really see anyone in the top 6 outside of OKC that the Wolves don't match up against. The Spurs have a ton of perimeter playmakers, and obviously they have the best or the most freakish player in the league. But watching the Rockets last night, Dane, and you and I are both watching that game. I don't know, like, don't you think just across the board that they would match up pretty well if they played a playoff series this weekend? Denver is always a little different because they have just a better overall player who gives them bigger fits. And I don't know what they do, the Wolves, to guard Jokic if Rudy goes down or he's in foul trouble. But against like a Rockets team or a Lakers team that has kind of come back down to earth, doesn't have any perimeter defense, I think if any 2 teams played tomorrow or this weekend, the Wolves would stack up pretty well. And I think that's why I'm excited about this upcoming schedule too, because I could be so wrong on that. But I do want to see how do the Spurs guard the Wolves, like with all those perimeter guys, like with Castle and Fox and Harper. Like, do they pick the Wolves up full court like Portland did? Do the Rockets just have a level of physicality that really frustrates Minnesota? Because those 2 Suns losses felt like Dylan Brooks just set the tone and the Wolves never punched back. So I don't see a team in the top 6 outside of OKC that is light years better than them. Do you?
Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks, and tonight is the in-season tournament championship. It is an island game, as they say. The only game on the schedule this evening is Spurs-Knicks. So it's kind of like Monday Night Football, where it's got all of your attention if you're watching the games. And I think that makes it more fun to have a Prize Picks lineup going. The numbers are kind of low. I was surprised. Only more or less than 21.5 points for Victor Wembanyama in that game. He had 22 against the Thunder on Saturday night. And that was his first game he played in. Kind of like him to have more than 21.5 tonight. You can take that one there. Or old friend Karl Anthony Towns, his points pick is also set at more or less than 21.5 points. You can take more or less on that. Maybe you want to go rebounds for Cat. That's set at more or less than 10.5 in that game. He's averaging 11.6 rebounds per game over his last 5. I think I'd like Cat to go over on more of his stats than not in tonight's game under the lights. There's always something going on over at Prize Picks, though, whether it's tonight for the in-season tournament, NFL, whatever it may be. And I think, you should try out getting a Prize Picks account. If you don't have one yet, all you have to do is put in the promo code Dane. When you do sign up, you'll receive $50 in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks.com, Prize Picks app, promo code Dane when you create that account. My answer is like, I don't know. Okay. I don't know about the Houston one. Or about Denver, and that's why I'm kind of drawing that line of demarcation there. But the Wolves are 6th if you look at the Western Conference standings right now.
Right.
And my point is, I think that exaggerates how low they are in the West. You're just looking at
one win back of the 3 seed. Yeah.
Yeah, but for some people who are just like cracking open the standings, right, and looking at it in that way. It just, the initial reaction is going to be, this is a team that went to the Western Conference Finals 2 years in a row, and it looks like there's a lot of teams better than them in the West. And I think that's an exaggeration. I don't know. Houston is a little bit of a black box to me here because I really could see that going like two different directions. I could see them having two primary scorers because Şengün is absolutely that, along with Durant, and that being a lot for them to manage. I could see the offensive rebounding of Houston being a lot for them to manage there as well. But it's also one of those teams that I think the Wolves would really get up for. And I think we would see that sort of like primal version of the Wolves. And that group is certain, when the Wolves are playing like that, is certainly not the sixth best team in the Western Conference. That version of the Wolves is the team that we saw compete with Oklahoma City the night before Thanksgiving. So we know like they got a gear that can get somewhat up there. Again, I'm not sure what that means against Denver. Yes, they played them twice this year on back-to-backs, and Jokic is clearly in a tier of his own in terms of players, but I don't know, because I didn't see that primal version of the Wolves against them, and I haven't seen the Wolves play Houston, period. But to have them be like definitively below San Antonio and the Lakers, I think is a bit much for me. I'm just going to try and rip through this somewhat quickly just to kind of set the scene of what the Western Conference is. Oklahoma City has the best record in the NBA. They're 24-2. They're fourth in offensive rating. Both Denver and Houston have better offenses than them thus far this season.
Okay.
Oklahoma City has the number one defense in the league, so none of the Western Conference teams are obviously better than them. They're better than all of them. Denver has the third best record in the NBA at 19-6, only behind Oklahoma City in the Western Conference. On offense, Denver is first in the NBA, so obviously first amongst all the Western Conference teams as well. But Denver is 18th in defense, which is behind Oklahoma City, which is behind Houston, which is behind Minnesota, which is behind San Antonio, and just slightly ahead of the Lakers. That's not great. To your Denver point before, I think you're kind of, that has to be feeling a little rocky that, sure, we're number one in offense, but this defense is clearly below average. San Antonio is tied for the fourth best record in the NBA, and third in the Western Conference. They're 18-7. They're ninth in offense, which means on offense, they've been worse than Denver. They've been worse than Houston. They've been worse than Oklahoma City. They've been worse than Minnesota, and they've been worse than the Lakers. Of the top six teams, San Antonio has had the worst offense amongst the group. And on defense, they're 15th, which is behind Oklahoma City, behind Houston, behind Minnesota. That 9th and 15th, I know they have a better record than the Wolves, but if I'm San Antonio, I'm a little nervous about how that stacks up. And I do not, despite having tied for the fourth best record in the league, I'm not sure I feel confident that, if I'm the Spurs, that we're going to for sure be hosting a first round playoff series. There's better offensive teams in the Western Conference for sure. And there's better defensive teams in the Western Conference as well. Now, some of those numbers might be a little bit depressed by Wemby, but I even think with Wemby, like, I don't think San Antonio is like some no-brainer best defensive team in the West. They're certainly not a better defensive team than the Thunder are. I think the Wolves have a defensive gear that can kind of get up to that level with them too. Then the Lakers are also tied for the fourth best record in the NBA. They're also 18-7, seventh on offense, which means they are behind Denver, Houston, Oklahoma City, and Minnesota. So the Lakers on offense are only better than San Antonio on offense amongst these Western Conference teams. And on defense, they're 19th. They're the worst defense in the top six in the Western Conference.
And I think it's getting worse. Like, I think it's like going to, over the next month, maybe fall into the 20s.
So imagine if we were doing daily podcasts on San Antonio or on the Lakers. I'm just saying we would be doing the same nitpicking type of deal. Those teams absolutely, would deserve that because they're not a top 10 team on both sides of the ball. They have defensive issues. Both of those teams, and offensively, the Spurs haven't been at a super high level. Now, Houston's interesting to me in that they have the seventh best record in the NBA. They're 16-7, but they're third on offense in the league, and they're third on defense, which means they're only behind Denver in the Western Conference in offense, and they're only behind Oklahoma City in the Western Conference on defense. That's top three on both sides of the ball is some really strong underlying numbers. So back to my analogy of like, how much would we, the nitpicking sort of thing? I think if you're Houston, it's been pretty like, this has been good. You know what I mean? Thus far, which again, in the context of the Wolves, maybe that means you put them behind them right now, tentatively. The Wolves are 6th in the West. They have the 8th best record in the NBA, 17-9, but worst of the top 6 teams in the West. On offense, they are 6th behind Denver, Houston, and Oklahoma City on offense, but better than San Antonio and better than the Lakers on offense this season. I feel like that piece, that the Wolves have been better on offense this season than San Antonio and the Lakers, I do not feel like that has been given enough acknowledgement over the course of this season. And a little bit of that is just narratives that come with the Lakers and narratives that come with Wemby and the star player kind of being whatever, ascending. The Wolves then on defense are 8th in the NBA, which means they are on defense are only behind Oklahoma City and Houston of those top Western Conference teams, ahead of San Antonio, well ahead of Denver on defense, and well ahead of the Lakers on defense. That's just all a bunch of numbers, but I think that highlights to me the idea of where I'm at is it goes tier 1, Oklahoma City, tier 2 at the moment, Denver, given how elite that offense has been, and Houston. Then the Wolves in a tier 3 by themselves, and San Antonio and the Lakers behind them. I think San Antonio and LA has bigger existential problems or scarier things for them than the Wolves do. Not a huge gap between those tiers, but I think the objective thing to say would be they're below Houston and Denver right now, and they're above San Antonio and the Lakers thus far.
When I mentioned the Thunder having those 2 projected top 9 picks in next year's draft, a very, very good draft, I wanted to set the stage because if you look at the top 6, Thunder, Nuggets, Lakers, Spurs, Rockets, Wolves, the one thing that you kind of have to be fearful of is that 3 of those teams, the Thunder, the Spurs, and the Rockets, have a war chest of ammunition if they just want to go address some issues, right?
Good point. Yeah,
and then the Lakers, the Nuggets, and the Timberwolves are like the opposite of that, where they have very few assets and their ability to get better is going to have to be, internal or around the margins, or God forbid someone gets lucky with another one of those D'Lo trades, right? Where you go get 2 guys and a couple 2nd-round picks that you can then kind of start to build other trades off of. So, but I'm with you on that. You mentioned a black box of Houston. The Houston stats are what they are. I also think it's just interesting again to look at who Houston's played. Like their wins are Nets, Mavs, Grizzlies, Bucks, Wizards, Blazers, Suns, like Jazz. Like they're also a lot of these teams in the top 6 right now, outside of OKC, who just beats literally everybody. They're all kind of devouring, as Britt says, cupcakes, and it's going to get tougher for all of them. The Rockets are the one that have the biggest injury, right? Because they lost their starting point guard, and now they're relying pretty heavily on a 2nd-year guy in Reed Shepherd. But I'm with you on that. I just think the Spurs, and maybe this is NBA Cup syndrome, but I don't know what to like. If the Wolves played the Rockets tomorrow, I kind of know how they would match up defensively, and I also think too in a playoff series. You said this earlier, like that would be so fun because you would get the articles about how the Wolves had the Durant trade lined up and then he said no, and like all the bulletin board material. With the Spurs, I have no idea at full strength without a trade for either team how the Wolves would defend San Antonio and like vice versa. Like who is going to guard Wemby in a playoff series? Probably, I mean, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but like Jaden.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I don't think you're going to have Rudy
patrolling. I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's going to be a matchup nightmare because then who guards Fox?
Right. And De'Aaron Fox, despite
it might be Rudy actually.
De'Aaron Fox historically being on a bad Kings team has always just crushed Minnesota. Like there's just been no one that can really defend him. So that might be an ant assignment. But yeah, I think bigger picture, just to kind of talk about something that's not nitpicking the Minnesota Timberwolves for a day, which they deserve a lot of nits to be picked. It's just looking around the league. This is why I always say, like, if you have League Pass, sometimes it's a good palate cleanser to just go. Bill Simmons talks about this all the time. Like, go look at another team's Reddit and just see what they're freaking out about. Because it's not isolated to your favorite team. I mean, all these teams, except for the team in Oklahoma, have these. I mean, the Denver stuff is actually fascinating to me because they keep stacking wins as well. While I don't know if the Michael Porter Jr. trade has worked out for them. They gave a pick, to get off that contract. And I'm sure the locker room is a much better vibe, but like, it just hasn't really worked out right now. And not that MPJ was like this defensive specialist, but without Aaron Gordon, like they are really just all gas, no brakes. Yeah, Christian Brown's been out too. So, but I think this is what kind of gets me ramped up again of most of these teams are beating bad teams. I do not believe every year we do this, and I hate it. The West is better. The West is better. I don't think the West is better. I don't think the league is better this year because after 6, like the Suns should get some love. They got absolutely FBI'd, robbed the other night against the Lakers. You got to go back and watch the last 4 minutes of that one. But like Golden State is just old and they don't really have any levers to pull. The Grizzlies keep.
Yeah, there's nothing else down there, right?
There's nothing. I mean, even if you think the Wolves are, you just think they're terrible and you hate everything about them, they're like, I would bet my literal life that they make the playoffs just because the bottom 5 in the West are terrible. So I think that also.
So how do you feel about that in the context of they're on pace for 54 wins? Because are we saying that it, as you just said, like the West and the league is not as good as it was a year ago? So, this
like, is it a juice ball era? Like, is it easier to hit home runs right now when the league
is easier to get to 54 wins now than it would have been a season ago? Like, I'm not saying that's not true, but I don't think both things can be true where we go, well, look at 17-9 and they're being on a 54 win pace, but also the West is worse.
100%. But then we also can't flip flop again and be like the Minnesota Timberwolves historically under this regime, whether it be Finch, Ant, whatever, stumble against all these bad teams. You know what I mean? Like, so if the balls are juiced, they're hitting them out of the park so far this season. And then as the pitching gets a little better in January and February, let's see what happens. But yeah, I do think a lot of these teams are chewing up on easy teams. And then it kind of pivots into nitpicking the top 6 of like, that's my biggest concern looking at the standings, is that some of these teams just have, everyone has that friend on vacation or spring break that just has more money and he can just he or she can do whatever they want. If the Thunder or the Rockets or the Spurs just want to throw themselves into the Giannis sweepstakes, like they can do that. And now those tiers get broken and the Wolves are looking up without, Bones Highland save us type mentality. So I do think it's an interesting kind of glance at the standings. I think we should do it again, 52 or 54 games into the season, because I don't remember doing this. You and I have done this for like 9 years now. I don't remember it being this tiered this early. Like it would take, they're 7.5 games clear of the 11 seed, which again, I know that doesn't mean much to you, but like we're only a quarter of the way through the season. Like if you
but last year they weren't, remember, right? There was a lot of time you look at the standings, it's supposed to be like in that plan.
Like the 9 spot.
They are clearly out of that. And I mean, you bet your life. I don't know if it's I mean,
the bottom 5 teams in the West are so bad.
Right.
The Sacramento Kings, that Kings Wolves game the other night, which is why I don't think we're going to talk about it at all, was the closest thing to a pickup basketball game I've ever seen. Like there was just, I mean, the Kings, just to say one thing, I hate like shitting on other teams, but I don't know what it was like for you in the arena. There was just an NBA franchise in 2025 just leaned so hard into Russell Westbrook. Like they have no blue chip guys. They had no one to kind of build around. It was just a sad thing. So yeah, I look forward to this upcoming schedule of like, I know the Wolves gave it their best the night before Thanksgiving against the Thunder, but the Rockets and Nuggets have played a couple times. I think the Rockets have lost both times. The Wolves have the Thunder coming up. They have at Denver on Christmas. And then in January, like they have an at Houston, at San Antonio back-to-back. Like that's what I'm putting on my calendar of like, okay, everyone's criticizing, and maybe rightfully so, the early lead you got out to in the race, but have you figured out enough stuff? That's kind of my bigger thing about stacking wins. Like, can you figure out things while the schedule is easier? And in the past, they never did that. They played with their food and then spilled it on the floor. At least now it seems like, for the most part, as they play with their food, they still end up consuming it and eating it. And that goes back to like the Jaden stuff, or like figuring out this Bones Highland thing, or, I know everyone has different opinions on Dante DiVincenzo. Maybe we can talk about that, but he's had a much better second year in Minnesota. And those are the little storylines that I think are going to kind of come to fruition as they start to play harder competition.
You mentioned the young guys, and I played that clip from Finch at the beginning of yesterday's episode with Jace, but we didn't, I don't know, we went in different directions and didn't really dive into that. I do think, sorry for people who listened to yesterday too, I'm gonna play this clip again, but I do, as Kyle and I were talking last night, we do think that this deserves a little bit more conversation, and it's a real like line in the sand that Finch has drawn. So if you didn't listen yesterday, if you haven't seen this clip, this is Finch after the game against Sacramento on Sunday night, and I asked him about Dillingham and Shannon getting more minutes than they have been, and if he's seen that to be advantageous to those guys' development. Rob, now that it's set with Ant out, it's 9-man rotation, so there's just like a couple more minutes available for those guys. Do you see that consistency of getting a second shift or being able to play 10 minutes for them making them more impactful or comfortable?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. So there's a lot of things. Right now, TJ played 30 minutes the other night in San Francisco, okay? And he earned all 30 minutes. And, much has been said about the 10-minute roles that these guys have. And with the way that we're constructed, we don't have anyone who near the top of the league in minutes led. We have a deep 6-7 guys who can all play upwards of the high 20s or in low 30s or mid 30s. And sometimes it just doesn't leave like this 20-minute role for these guys, and we've been playing 10. And, what if the role is only 10 minutes? I mean, shouldn't you go out and crush those 10 minutes? And then be ready to go back if we need you more, or, maybe we run with you a little bit longer, but, not everyone's going to play their best basketball every night. But the reality is, like, that's the role right now. And they got to nail it. And we expect that there's going to be good days and bad days because they're second-year players. And that's what second-year players do. They have inconsistencies. If you play 3 games, you hope that you get one good, one not so good, and one maybe stinker. And you got to turn that into 2 positives and maybe 1 negative. And once we get there, then things start to go.
Today's show is brought to you by Skims. Skims obviously has an expansive lineup in the women's clothing space, but they've really expanded their product to the men's side of things, specifically men's underwear. And I've said this before, but my favorite thing about Skims is that it is a type of boxer brief that both works for going to the gym and also just works for everyday life. I have the stretch 5-inch boxer briefs, and they work functionally just kind of like compression shorts I would wear back in the day when I played basketball, or for when I go on runs, but these ones are significantly more comfortable. I think that's what's unique about them is they can be, you could wear one pair to the gym and you can wear another pair after the gym because they are built for both. Like I said, the 5-inch stretch boxer briefs are my personal favorite, but they also have cotton briefs amongst other styles. I think you should try and find a pair that works for you. Be more comfortable. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com and Skims stores and let them know we sent you. After you place your order, you can select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. And if you are looking for the perfect gift this season, the Skims holiday shop is now open at skims.com. Today's show is also brought to you by Storyworth Memoirs, and we're excited to have Storyworth back as a holiday season gift option for your parents or your loved ones. I think if you're around my age, this is a great gift to give to your parents. The idea behind Storyworth is uncovering stories you didn't know about your loved one. This is how it works. Each week, Storyworth emails a loved one a memory-provoking question that you get to choose. What were your favorite toys as a child? What's something you're most proud of? And all your loved one needs to do is respond to that email with a story. After a year, Storyworth compiles your loved one's stories and photos into a beautiful keepsake hardcover book. Photos are printed in color in the book, and it will be a treasure your loved one and you will be able to share and revisit for generations. Customers love Storyworth. They've printed over 1 million books and have preserved 35 million family stories. since their founding 13 years ago. They also have 48,000 5-star reviews on Trustpilot. I use Storyworth, and I think you should too. Give your loved ones a unique keepsake you'll all cherish for years. Storyworth Memoirs. Right now, save $10 or more during their holiday sale when you go to storyworth.com/DaneMoore. That's storyworth.com/DaneMoore to save $10 or more on your order. What'd you make of that, Kyle?
I'm glad you asked that question. Is such a tell. When he so shout out to you that you're holding people accountable as the internet wants. It was very telling to me because it kind of just hints at being a little more online. Like they know internally what we talk about externally about just wanting these young guys to get more minutes. And I mean, I'm a pro Finch guy, but I've found
I don't think everybody wants them to get more minutes. I don't necessarily want that. I don't necessarily see that as to be right.
Wait.
But certainly some people do.
Wait, explain that a little more. Like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I think we all, or at least I'm speaking for a large majority, wanted the young guys to just have more minutes. And I think that has changed over the last couple of weeks, not only with the Bones Hyland thing, who I just want to mention on a podcast because not everyone has social media. I was blown away when I remembered that Bones Hyland is younger than Terrence Shannon Jr. So when we talk about these three young guys, like Bones Hyland has to be in the Terrence Shannon Jr. mix now because Terrence played 4 years in college. Bones came in the NBA early, but like they're kind of on the similar development path. I think
that's not true, man. How is that? What? He's been in the league for a long time.
I mean, they've both played. Well, okay. Now, if you want to get into that, like I think Bones Hyland is their Nikhil now in terms of salvageable projects. Of could Bones Hyland be the guy that is on a partial contract and then signs a 2-year, $6 million? And, like Nikhil, his last 5 games in Utah played 18 total minutes. Like he was pretty much Bones Hyland before Bones Hyland was, and then thrown into a trade.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I didn't know that's what you're saying. I thought you meant that like similar stages in their development path of, I mean, Bones has just played like in the NBA a lot. And TJ hasn't, which I think that's just a weird thing about age. And I guess I'm not even sure if this is right or not, because you are right. Terrence Shannon Jr. is older than Bones Hyland, but I think that Bones Hyland is significantly further along his development path. And I think that shows up when I watch him play. Just a comfort, a confidence, not a sort of caution about who he is that I do see in TJ and Rob. So I don't know, maybe we're...
Well, I mean, and I think this probably comes down to maybe Tyler Metcalf could answer this better, but I mean, Bones Hyland has been in the league much longer than Terrence Shannon Jr. and had seasons where he just didn't play. So, I mean, I don't know if he had the development of NBA minutes because he wasn't really doing much. He had a hot start to the season, then he didn't do anything. Whatever. Back to the bigger picture of what Finch said about that 10. I mean, the biggest takeaway from that soundbite is that if we can only give you 10 minutes, shouldn't you go out there and crush in those 10 minutes? And even though I am pro Finch, like I'm biased, like I agree with that, right? Like if you're given a sliver of opportunity, isn't that just like sports in a nutshell of when your number is called, go out and make the most of your number? I think your question was more about like, okay, but if you give them a stint in the first half, is it hard on these guys to not have a stint in the second half to kind of like, the sauna analogy of like warm up and then have a little bit of a rhythm? So I hate that I'm like pro Finch on some of this stuff, but in this case, it's like, isn't that what young guys should do? Like when your number is called, go out there and make the best of it. And going back to Terrence, like he just hasn't done that. Like the net rate, every statistic right now for Terrence Shannon Jr. is not just bad. It's like he's unplayable. And then you watch him in these games and it's like those 4 years at Illinois, or these thousands of shots that he put up all summer, how was there never right-hand layups? Like that has been scouted so quickly now that he just has no finishing around the rim. And it's become a detriment to this team. I thought he did have good stints in Golden State. I think Rob, of all these young guys, to me, is the most promising all of a sudden because while he's kind of showing you a little more flair offensively,
You think Rob's the most promising of more than Bones and TJ?
Oh, no. We talked.
Okay.
I'm not trying to talk shit to each other here, but like I had to throw Bones out. So I'm talking about Terrence and Jalen and Rob. I think Rob has shown like he's kind of a neutral defender. And I don't know if the coaching staff
gets not. What?
You don't think Rob is like fought his ass? You don't think? So what is
not
Rob?
A neutral defender? I mean,
I think compared to coming out of the draft,
he has good hands. He has really good hands, and that helps. You can't be a neutral defender and weigh 165 pounds in the NBA. That's just a fact. That there's. How about this as an example? Like Jose Alvarado is probably the best very small defender in the league, but has a huge problem in a ton of matchups, right? Like Jose Alvarado is more so a pest than he is a good defender. In a playoff series, if the Pelicans were ever to make it, or if he gets traded to another team, like you would go at that. And that's something Jose Alvarado can't do anything of, and he's fought against it immensely by being a pest as much as he possibly can. And it is hands, and it is in the backcourt. It is doing those sort of things. And I think to Rob's credit, and I've talked about this a bunch, I've been super impressed by Rob's pestering and hands and deflections and those sort of things. I just don't think in the NBA right now you can be 6 feet, 165 pounds and not be giving something up on defense. And I think Rob is.
And okay, let's just
in my opinion, whatever you can have your opinion.
Let's talk about the clip again. What did you think? Because you played the clip yesterday, and I would have loved to hear Jace's opinion on it. Like, what did you think about the clip, and then just the overall message of like, if all we can do right now is give you an appetizer, that appetizer needs to be enough for you to build upon. Do you agree with that coaching philosophy? Because this is really about philosophy of coaching athletes.
No, I do not. I'm not a coach, though, but if you want my opinion on it, I get why those guys aren't playing more than 10 minutes. I get why when the roster is fully healthy, it's capped at 10. That makes sense to me. If you're going to play 10 guys, that those guys don't have more than 10 minutes available. I would also note that they're not playing 10 minutes. You know, prior to these last two games that Edwards and Conley were out, Shannon's minute totals were 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 9 minutes, and 8 minutes. Those are all numbers less than 10. Prior to this weekend, when Conley and Edwards were out, Rob Dillingham had not played more than 8 minutes and 37 seconds in a game since Thanksgiving. So the one isn't even 10. And I don't think either of them have done much to be like, absolutely, they deserve more than 10 minutes. If anything, their production, what the film has said, is this is probably an out of the rotation guy right now. But you're in this unique spot of you had 2 first-round picks in the 2024 draft. Those are your 2 first-round picks in a team that makes them extremely important assets to your team going forward. And so you're Finch, and you're in this spot of needing to consider that, right? Of needing to consider developing these players along the way. And if you're just completely shelved out of the rotation, then it's going to be harder to make that development happen. My shift in my stance over the last maybe 3 weeks or so has been, if they are going to play for developmental reasons, because you've determined that's best for the
can't have your
big
cake and
picture
eat
of
it
your
too.
team.
Yeah.
You like, then I think they need to be playing. It's just a theory, but I think my theory would be that by playing them multiple shifts would lead you to get better production from them. And I think the best example of that is Terrence Shannon Jr. in the Golden State game. Again, it wasn't a 10-man rotation, but giving him the room and the leash and the length. I mean, that game felt to me like, for the first time ever, that Terrence Shannon Jr. is playing the Nickeil Alexander-Walker role and doing something in it. And I think part of that was because he got multiple shifts. Now, that said, you run it back the next game. Is it likely that if you give him those multiple shifts that you get the same production? No. But that's the push and pull of this that I think is tough. I mean, it's a similarly tough thing as we were talking about last year with the 8-man rotation. Like, this is tricky. To Finch's point about the roster and the 6th and 7th guys needing a lot of minutes, it's tough. brought it up in a general question. Like, I don't know. I'm curious and asking Finch of, do you think that by playing them a second shift, that does in fact increase their likelihood for production in a sample size that is bigger than one game? I think that might be the case, but he's saying, yo, there's not the minutes for that. That is not an option right now. Our only option right now is this half measure of playing them one shift in the first half. And if that's good, playing them again in the second half. And what's sort of played out over these first 26 games is that second shift doesn't come along very often. And now you have really bad production from both Rob Dillingham and Terrence Shannon Jr. in the aggregate over the course of the year. I don't know what the answer is. I don't think it's a ridiculous theory, though, to say if you're going to play them, it's probably got to be a role that isn't 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 9 minutes, 8 minutes. I don't think TJ knows how to play that way. And maybe he doesn't know how to play consistently in a 20-minute role either. I don't know. We haven't seen enough of that, but I don't think that half measure is really accomplishing anything for them other than the guys just being shelved on the bench.
Yeah, and this kind of sets up, and I don't have an answer for this, and I would like for you to answer this or people listening to this, but it goes back to like, what do you think if Chris Finch worked in corporate America, the number one thing on the job description would be? Like, what is the 40%? I would imagine it's to win games. So we just did 35 minutes of the standings. And I'm not setting this up, this isn't a gotcha. Would we feel better if Terrence looked like a rotation player and this team was 13-13? Like, that's like a real question I have, because the Terrence numbers to me are different than the Rob. I mean, Rob and Jalen and Terrence are so fascinating because they're all like so various in what they do and the nitpicks of it. But all the advanced numbers that I listen to you guys talk about, or I see online, or I look on NBA.com, it's like Terrence is just sinking them. So I'm with you that you can't Venn diagram this of like have your cake and eat it too, and like develop guys while also trying to like win games. But if Terrence Shannon Jr. goes out there for 5 minutes and is like in the game, like a net rating of -65 at halftime, is Micah like, we got to give him 5 more minutes? Like, that's got to be the
really
best
tough
thing
for wins. Yeah. The best thing for wins, I think this has been clear for like a month. If the sole goal was winning games, the best thing for this team to do would be to not play Terrence Shannon Jr. or Rob Dillingham at all. Be out of the rotation. But that would be too hyper focused on the now, probably. I think most people would argue that playing them 20 minutes a night, both of them, or playing both of them multiple shifts, even call it 15 minutes a night, then that would be probably dismissing wins too much in the now. So I think what they've done is try to find this compromise in the middle. And I don't think it's actually as much of a compromise as it seems like. And I could just be wrong on that. Clearly the coach disagrees and thinks that this is the best thing for them to be doing. But to me, it feels like a half measure between two pathways that both wouldn't really make sense, of not playing them at all or playing them 15 to 20 minutes every night. Is that a fair stance?
Yeah, I know. I'm just trying to talk it out because, again, I know birthdays and age isn't a statistic, but in November, Bones played in 8 games. They went 7-1, and he never played more than 10 minutes. It was 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 9 minutes, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 minute. And then when his number was
garbage time. Yeah.
Right. But I'm just saying, like, he seems like someone who's in this age pocket that when his number is called upon, he goes out there and just tries to make the most of his opportunity. Now, granted, in the last couple of games without Mike, he has played 60 minutes and then 36, but I don't know. I don't actually have an answer to this. I just thought it was a fascinating answer because it was clearly like enough of all the online talk. Like, this is the role they have. I mean, they haven't really been addressing that, right? Like in media day, it was like Terrence Shannon Jr. could average 17 points a game. And it's like, I think what you're trying to say is he can't average 17 points a game if he plays 8 minutes. So what do you do? And then in the second half, I don't know if you like the rotation stuff, but it felt like eye test watching that Kings game that the Wolves just played like 5.5 guys the second half. because they wanted to beat the Kings. Like, I don't know if Jaden really subbed out. It was like Jaden and Julius, or Jaden and Nas, and then Dante played the whole thing, and Bones was out there for 36 minutes. So I do wonder if this could spiral, or if they internally feel okay with what they're doing. Like, I can't imagine they're loving that these young guys in a Western Conference that we just talked about, that they have to have internal growth because they can't go out and trade for Giannis just using picks, how they feel about it. But they keep winning games. They're not getting much from the young, cheap contract guys. And I just don't know what, like, do they become Golden State? I mean, totally different context, but like, do the young promising guys like Kuminga and Pods, on these guys just in what, like, do they just become worthless in like trade value or any sort of development? It's still, to me, the biggest topic. Like, I know we talk about the point guard situation and if they go out and address that or whatever, but to me, it's what do they do with these three guys? Maybe the fourth guy being Bones. Obviously, Johan Berenger is kind of probably just redshirting at least for the next couple months, but I thought it was cool that he addressed it. I thought it was even better that he asked the question. I don't have a firm answer on it, but I'm just going to stick my flag in, Dane, that I think if your number's called upon, you got to go out there and do something. But I acknowledge that you're like, okay, but if you think you're going to be out there for 36 seconds, how do you work up a sweat? How do you work up a rhythm?
What he did, he talked about the one good game,
one bad game, one terrible game. Yeah,
one
it wasn't
terrible
even a
game.
porridge. It was two bad porridges.
Yeah. So it's kind of a low standard, right? Like, if it is, let's say, Edwards and Conley are back for the next game or whenever they're back, and you go back to playing Terrence 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 9 minutes, or 8 minutes as he was when they were healthy, what do you think the odds are that if you play him there, that you're going to get a good game?
Not very good.
Right. So that's why I'm like, I don't know if it even meets the 1/3 of the time standard, or at least thus far it hasn't. I don't feel like Rob really has met that standard yet either. So maybe I'm just doing we'll do something different because this isn't working. But I think if we're actually like watching the games too, it doesn't look like they're ready and able to be doing much there. I think giving them a second shift would be hoping that they could do more, and that rhythm, would be a thing, that confidence would be a thing. I do think that, generally speaking, what Finch is talking about there is pretty dismissive of the idea of rhythm and confidence being real things. Even if I understand where he's like, yo, there's just not minutes here for that. How are we going to do it? It's a weird collision. I don't think there's a for sure right or wrong answer there. What do you think it's going to look like when Ant and Conley
I was going to say, that's the elephant in the room. I mean, the Ant one is the best player is coming back. I think there's an interesting conversation that could be had down the road of like, is Ant, while he's missing these games, you and Jace had just a truly fascinating conversation yesterday about ball movement. I'm wondering, like, with the Ant stuff, like, is he learning some of this stuff that Julius learned when Julius was out? And I think that's a topic to be addressed maybe with someone smarter than me, like Britt. But the Mike Conley part is like the elephant in the room for me, because again, we have all these segments of people now, the three young guys, and then Bones. Is he a young guy? Is he a vet? Whatever. Like, what have you seen from Mike Conley this season other than the behind the scenes stuff that would say Mike should leapfrog Bones?
all it would be at this point is the 3-point shot and career 40-point. 40% shooter.
Resume. Yeah.
First 10 games of the season, he's shooting like 50% from three. There's a lot of value in having an elite catch and shoot guy. And then he injects some basketball IQ, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those would be the cases. But I've been watching the games too, and those things haven't been happening. He hasn't been hitting the shot there. He hasn't looked like a smooth operator as frequently, and he's just really been struggling. And I think it is a reasonable conversation to have of giving some of these collisions that they're having right now of not enough minutes for Shannon or Dillingham, Bones maybe deserving more minutes here, and also understanding that the presence of Clark really does help the defense for this team. I think, yeah, it's a much more reasonable conversation to have. What is Mike's role in this rotation, if at all? He was already, before the season got started, got demoted from the starting lineup and 28 minutes a night to an off the bench role and much fewer minutes per night. So he's out of that top group. I think tier one of this team. Well, maybe tier one of the rotation is Ant and Julius. Tier two is like, and Jaden. Ant, Julius, Jaden, tier one. Their minutes are protected kind of no matter what. They're going to be mid-30s, right? Then it's like Rudy, Dante, and Nas are in that next tier of still being 30-minute a night guys or close to it. So that's your 6 there. And then a month ago, Mike was the top of that next tier, right? And now to me, he's fallen into tier 3, which includes Mike Conley, Bones Highland, and Jalen Clark, which does get us to 9 guys right there. And then tier 4 is Terrence Shannon Jr. and Rob Dillingham. That seems to be the pecking order of this, though. I don't know. Let's see what it looks like when Mike Conley came back. I think with Finch's history with Mike, we would assume that he's going to keep him in more of that protected tier up there of guys who are in the rotation every night. But I don't know. Does maybe Mike has fallen down to the Rob and TJ group of not completely being out of the rotation, but much more limited or game to game specific. The reality of the situation is all those guys are not going to be able to play. And I think the hint before Ant's injury was Finch was like, all right, we got to get rid of one guy from the rotation. And he chose Rob Dillingham to be the one to get rid of and played Bones Highland over him in that game. So I think that would be our best guess of how this goes is Rob, once the team is back to full health, that Rob is out of the rotation. And TJ's probably stays in. I feel like TJ's always sort of stayed somewhat above Rob in the pecking order this season, despite struggling as much or more than he has. But that would be kind of the way I look at it right now.
I just want to add one more ingredient to the young guy cocktail of the 10-minute roll and the second stint thing, because I don't think there's a winner or loser here, right? You're just trying to figure out what is the best for both this team and for these young guys. But I do think this is important. The last 9 straight games, the Wolves have not led at halftime.
Yeah.
In the last 9 straight games, the Wolves have outscored their opponent in the second half. And at 17-9, the Wolves lead the league with 10 wins while trailing at halftime. So that has to be factored into. That kind of tells you that the guys aren't getting second stints. The better players play. And then they win the game. And I'm not.
I'm all for it. If the primary goal is winning at all costs, like it was last year when they went to the 8-man rotation, then yeah, Terrence Shannon Jr. and Rob Dillingham should not be playing right now, and maybe not Mike Conley either. I
think that's fascinating. You know what I mean? That is like the stat that actually says by not giving them a second stint, we have a better chance to win. I was the gap year guy. And that blew up in my face. But now I do kind of think we're back to you didn't get enough development from the cheap contract guys. And now you have to lean into, and one of the other things that was fascinating about that Finch clip was we don't have anyone who really leads the league in minutes. And as we're all trying to, piece together, how do we get Terrence Shannon Jr. 11 minutes? Sometimes I'm sitting on my couch being like, I wish Jaden just played 5 more. He's the biggest on-court, leadership power ranking. Sometimes I feel like he's number 1 right now. I thought he took that Sacramento Kings game more serious than any of his teammates. So it's if you think Julius is playing really well, let's crank the dial up Julius 3-4 more minutes, and that goes into the 240-minute puzzle that you and Jace always talk about. So it's a fascinating dilemma. I think Finch finally put it out there into the ether of this is all we can give him right now. Maybe that's good for them. Maybe it's good for them to hear it publicly and all their friends and stuff here, but I don't know if they've addressed it. And I don't know, it's only going to get worse because in a 240-minute game, the best players coming back to play 38, maybe on Wednesday against Memphis. And then you have this Mike Conley situation where he's the trusted guy, but I don't know if he's doing anything right now that's better than what Bones is giving them. It's going to be fascinating. Like, how do you put Bones back in the box? All that stuff.
Today's show is brought to you by Factor. And when winter comes around in our household, we start doing Factor because with a busier routine in the fall and winter, I'm going to games a lot of nights. Finding time to cook can be really tough. And that's why I love Factor. Their chef prepped, dietitian approved meals make it easy to stay on track and enjoy something comforting and delicious no matter how hectic the season gets. Factor also has more variety in their meals than they ever have before. You can choose from a wider selection of weekly meal options, including premium seafood choices like salmon and shrimp at no extra cost. For more choices to better nutrition, that's why 97% of customers say that Factor helped them live a healthier life. And you can feel the difference no matter your routine. I really do use this, and I think you should too. Eat smart at factormeals.com/DaneMoore50 off and use code DaneMoore50 off to get 50% off your first box. Plus, you will receive free breakfast for 1 year. That's code DaneMoore50 off at factormeals.com for 50% off your first box, plus free breakfast for 1 year. You can find that URL code in the show notes. Get delicious, ready-to-eat meals delivered with Factor. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. Yeah, I guess I'm just assuming Bones will not be put back in the box because he was let out of the box when the team was fully healthy and played well in that Phoenix game. So I'm assuming he is firmly in there. Finch has also said, he was asked about it at practice the next day and said, did Bones' performance change where he's at the rotation? And Finch said, absolutely. So, okay. And I think that was kind of for 15 minutes ago when we started talking about this, I think we were looking at this a little bit differently of you were including TJ, Rob, and Bones all in that group. And that kind of confused me a little bit. Just because I do think Bones has been put into a separate tier than those guys have been. And frankly, to Bones' credit, I think he's not only shown it in effective production in the Phoenix game and the Sacramento game, but to what we were talking about even earlier in the episode, he's showing the value of putting in pace, the value of having a secondary handler out there, those sort of things. I don't think anybody could make a really strong case that Bones shouldn't be playing. I'm not sure if there's people out there saying, why is Bones Highland playing over Rob Dillingham? I don't know. Maybe there is because it's the future sort of thing. But I think if you're actually watching the games, you can see that doesn't appear to be very close right now.
The thing that needs to be said on this topic that has not been said is that during the Chris Finch tenure or the Tim Conley era, they have not drafted a player who they have strongly developed internally. In my opinion, like they have not drafted a player using a pick that they then, pumped the tires up and made him a bigger, stronger balloon. But they have developed the guys that were here. Like you cannot say that Chris Finch doesn't develop guys and then look at Jaden McDaniels and Nasri, right? Or Julius Randle wasn't a reclamation project by any means, but is maybe playing his best basketball. The Nickeil Alexander-Walker thing, I really do think there are similarities between where his career was at in Utah and where Bones' career was at. And like, I could see Bones signing with Minnesota again because he has a guaranteed role in next season. And then 2 seasons from now, I don't know if he's going to get 480, but like, could he go get the mid-level a couple of years from now because he was built back up by Chris Finch in this organization? But you do also have to acknowledge that there's not one player that Tim Conley has drafted since he got here that this coaching staff has made into a better player. And that is kind of the elephant in the room of some of this stuff of like, none of the guys that they bring in get better via the draft, but some of the guys they bring in as like, Aaron Rodgers said last night, cast-offs, they do build back up and turn their careers around. So they've all been guys who have been playing. They played. Yeah. And that might be it.
Right. I mean, that's at least a factor, right? Like that's pretty clearly a factor in it. And I don't again,
had played in the past, you mean, right? Like Nikhil had played a ton of minutes in New Orleans and stuff like that. You mean, right?
Or I mean, Jaden and Nas, I think, have gotten a lot better because they've gotten committed to 30-minute a night roles. They never tried to peel anything back away from Jaden as a shooter, as a creator, or whatever. They're always trying to give him more, never took away from him. I think even with Nas, like, it was never of let's try to peel this back, let's try and do less. It was always like, nope, we're going to keep putting Nas out there to see if he can improve as a defender, do these rebounding, physical, like that. Rather than quitting him, they put more into them. And I think that's where development from those guys came, and I don't think that's apples to apples with Rob and TJ, but I think there's some sort of corollary there of, I don't think it's crazy that the idea that if they were playing in a role that had more minutes would allow them to get more rhythm and confidence, that you might get a better version of them. That in and of itself does not mean they should be playing at all. It's about what are your priorities there, and that's for them to figure out. Like, that's for Finch and Conley and the coaching staff and the front office to be like, what is our best strategy here of not neglecting these younger players that we invested a lot in the draft, while also not neglecting getting wins in this Western Conference, when we're a team that believes that we're a perennial conference finals team. This is what was going to come by drafting 2 first-round players onto a team that had just gone to the Western Conference Finals, and then adding 2 more starting caliber players that same summer in DiVincenzo and Randall, only losing 1 in Cat. Like, the numbers were going to be the numbers. They knew on September 28th, when they traded for Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo, that there was not going to be a clean development path in terms of minutes available for the young guys to develop. They knew that, and this is how it's played out. Like, those guys, Rob and TJ, would have needed to really had to overcome something to be able to be guys that in this limited role showed you something this far in their career. And thus far, neither of them really have, outside of like a couple games here and there. To TJ's credit, some of those games came in the playoffs. I think that matters.
Yep.
Yeah. I think a couple of TJ's games have come against like Oklahoma City specifically. That's encouraging, but it's just a tricky situation. And I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I just know what Chris Finch's answer is, and he just drew that line there. I don't think it's like a contentious thing. I think it's his read on the situation, and who would know better what to do than Chris Finch would. He would certainly know better than I would. So, but if you ask me philosophically, in my head, it doesn't perfectly line up. And I think that's because this roster construction doesn't perfectly line up. I don't think it's a situation where we can go gold star, gold star, gold star, gold star. It's all working. Like, it's just not, it wasn't ever going to be that.
I did find it interesting that this is the first time we've recorded in a week, and we're kind of hanging it up for the day here. But I did a poll of, in my typical fashion, I was like, this frustrating start, who do you blame the most? And the front office finished 4th behind the local media. Because I'm with you. I've never thought that the roster fully made sense. And again, like, you come in and you trade all those picks for Rudy Gobert, and you put yourself like, we're going to be better, we're going to contend faster, but we also have to hit the margins. And these young guys are the margins, right? Like, Bones Highland is a margin, and that's working out really well. I mean, the fact that he's giving you these numbers on a partially guaranteed contract is huge. I think Dante DiVincenzo, leading the team in net rating while making less than the mid-level exception is a margin. But I think, ironically, with a loose outline today, like, to end here, but start with the fact that in the top 6 of the West, some of these teams have to just figure it out inside, and some of them have the benefit of figuring it out with ammo and draft cap and all this stuff. Like, it does put the microscope on this front office and this coaching staff to figure it out, because I still come from the fact of like wins matter and to build these things up now so that in February you're not looking down at the 7th seed and being like, holy shit, like we got to avoid that. I think the top 6 could be even more cemented 6 weeks from now, where it's like these 6 are just playing for positioning now. Like there's no chance they're going to be in the play-in. But then that's where Britt comes in and it's like, okay, but who is your 8-man rotation come April 15th? And there's no way they know that right now. We don't know that. I don't think they know that. And that is something that I think concerns a lot of people.
To your point at the beginning of the pod, this stuff seems to change game to game or week to week, you know, and I'm sure I don't know if you and I are going to do Friday or if we won't go again until early next week, but it will just feel different at that. We'll have different information to use effectively, and we'll probably have information that we overreact to, you know, and that's kind of part of trying to figure it out.
There is like one line on the graph that's just steadily kind of increasing, right? Like we don't know who the point guard fully is come playoff time, and we don't know about the rotation stuff. And then there's like the other one that goes, you know, big ups and downs. There is volatility into game to game, but I do think 26 games in, 17-9, the big questions we had in October still exist in December, right?
Right.
What's going on with player development and who is the running mate, the best running mate for the final 4 minutes of a game and clutch time stuff? We don't know that. We've seen Rudy Gobert kind of come back and be a defensive force, and we've seen Jaden grow and Julius grow and Dante grow, and so that's what makes it fun, right? Like the big questions are still the big questions, but we have so many more things to kind of point at to be either excited about or maybe be concerned about.
No, absolutely, and I think it should be fun, and I think sometimes the problem solving can be fun too, right? It can be hard because when you take a step in the wrong direction, you can step in it.
Yeah.
But you can also step out of it and move back in the other direction. It's 82 game season. And as we went through with the record being 17-9, like they are generally speaking, moving in the right direction, even if that right direction doesn't have them at the Oklahoma City Thunder's level right now. Like that's okay too. They're in, as we're here like a week before Christmas, like they're battling their way amidst the top of the Western Conference, which the top of the Western Conference is very good, and those are going to be difficult teams to overcome in an individual matchup and difficult to overcome in the standings. But it's not crazy to think that this Wolves team could do those things. I'm not ruling out their ability to be able to beat those teams or even to be able to finish ahead in the standings at the end of the year above the Denvers and Houstons, because I do think this Wolves team is beginning to figure some things out, even if it's not, they're not doing it very fast. It makes a lot of sense to me that this Wolves team, even without a trade, could be a lot better in 6 weeks than it is right now. And in that time, they're going to have played a lot more of these teams, a lot more difficult games, a lot more probably tighter games that we'd learn more about. Like, yeah, I'm fascinated to see what that looks like. And when those things happen, we'll have a better idea of where exactly, the Wolves fit in the Western Conference and where these players fit in the pecking order of the rotation. We don't know right now. But all things said, they're 17-9 and in a pretty good place entering, definitely not a bad place, entering kind of the holiday season.
If you keep looking up and wanting to be higher and higher, you at least need to acknowledge sometimes looking down. And the Clippers are 6-20, and they're 5.5 games behind the Jazz. So I would not trade my life to be someone in the Clippers organization. But 17-9, and we'll see what happens at home on Wednesday against the Memphis Grizzlies.
Absolutely. He's Kyle Theige. You guys can follow him on Twitter at Kyle Theige. You'll see if we have you come back on Friday. We're kind of figuring out the end of the week schedule here a little bit, but we'll certainly be back on before Christmas. Early next week. The next episode will be with Chris Hine, and we are going to do one of those right after the game episodes. It is at Target Center. They play the Memphis Grizzlies Wednesday night, and Chris and I will come here to the studio to record one of our sort of immediate reaction episodes to that. So that'll be next up in your feed. Until then, he's Kyle. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hard so you can find me in the crowd, yeah, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.